Hey guys, it's Keith here. Just today, Logan pushed out a copy of all of his package sequences using the package sequence functionality. And I thought I would take the opportunity to walk people through the best practices around how to download these things, where to put them, how to go through the process of preparing them for import, and then also go through the import. Now, I'm going to base today's demo on the upcoming 2017.13 release. In the last release or so, there's been a number of changes to import and the like, and I'm going to take advantage of some of those capabilities. Hopefully, we'll have 13 out in the next couple of days, and you'll be able to do things the same way. But like I said, there's a bunch of tricks for young players here, and I want to go through them. So let's start off with downloading these things. I'll do Star Wars Funk. I have never actually properly mapped Logan sequences to mine before, so we're pretty much going to be doing it from scratch. And we'll do a direct download. Here it comes. It's not a huge file, and we'll open it up. Now, the first thing to understand is that whenever you do a package sequence, in the root of the zip file is always a folder. This is really important. I do this for a very specific reason. This is Logan's show folder. This is what he called it. Do not be tempted to change this name. Changing this name will cause you all sorts of pain. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to grab this folder and everything inside it and put it somewhere. So let me go to my show folder. Here's my show folder. It's got all the usual xLights, RGB effects and all that sort of stuff in here and all of my sequence. And I have a bunch of subdirectories as well. Everything I use in my sequences sits underneath my show folder. My show folder is deliberately not specific to any particular year or anything else. I just call it home. Now, I could call it Christmas, but as I happen to only do Christmas, it's pointless. It doesn't really matter. But you want this folder name to never, ever change. The folders above it can change. I can call it whatever I like up here. But once I've settled on a show folder name, I want it to be the same every year. So I can go under my lights and create a 2017 folder and copy my home folder into it, and that's all cool. Everything will work. But if I change the name of this folder, all of my existing sequences, all of the pictures that they point to and everything else will break, and I'll be in for a world of pain, and I don't want to be there. So when it comes to imported sequences, I have an imported folder here, and it's important that when you take a sequence like Logan's sequence or whatever, that you place them into a folder underneath your show folder, right? That's really important. It means that when you pick up your show folder and you move it to another computer via Dropbox or by copying it or whatever, all of the images and everything else which you're going to be pointing to will all still map correctly. If you take Logan's folder and you put it somewhere else on your hard disk, as soon as you move your show to another location, onto another computer, everything breaks, nothing will render correctly, all the image files and all that sort of thing will be lost. So I haven't imported. I don't have any Logans, so we'll go in here and we'll create a folder and we'll call it Logan, so I know where they came from. In this case, it's Star Wars Funk, so I'm going to create a folder for that as well because his show folder is not specific to the sequence. And over time, Logan may change his show, so he may add more elements, etc. And so if I want to import his elements from different shows, everything may be different. And if I try and put everything into a single folder, things like the RGB effects file are going to be overwritten, and they're going to represent whatever is the last thing I copy into the folder, and that's not a good thing. So whenever someone shares you a sequence, and this includes Sean and Lilia or anyone else, if they share you a sequence, create a new folder for this particular sequence, and we'll place our files in here. So we'll go back to our zip file here. We'll grab the 2016 folder and we place that underneath the Star Wars Funk. So if I was to go and download another one of his files, I don't know, can't stop the Santaman, I imagine that is. I would create another folder under Logan called Can't Stop the Santaman, and I would place all of his sequence files in that and keep them separate. Don't be tempted to try and smash them all into one folder. Once again, world of pain. Okay, so this then is the files that he's included. It includes his RGB effects, which is all of his models. It includes his networks, which is all of his network setup. Now, a lot of the time this is not really important, but if Logan has used universe and start channel or output and start channel as the way in which he determines the start channels for his models, if you don't have that networks file, none of that stuff will resolve correctly. So that's why it's included. It generously gives us his house image, which is useful for understanding exactly how Logan has laid all of his elements out. And then these are the folders, these three here are folders that he had in his show directory that had various elements which are referenced in this sequence. And this lost folder is things that he referenced in the sequence which weren't located in his show folder. And he happens to have sent me his audio file, which is kind of nice. It'll make it a lot easier to import. Most people, when they send you sequences, will not include the audio for copyright reasons and the like. So that's all of Logan's sequence. Now, the first thing we need to do is we need to open this sequence up as if we were Logan. So if we come back here to xLights, and this is obviously my house, we're going to go back to the Setup tab and we're going to change the folder. We're going to go into our imported Logan Star Wars Funk folder, xLights 2016, and we're going to select that folder. We don't want to save anything. And so now we get Logan's network setup. We get Logan's house image and all of his models. So that's all looking good. So now we're going to open up his sequence. Okay, so his sequence appears to be here, buried away in this folder here, which is fine. So we'll open that up. We can still see his house preview and we can see all of the effects and everything in his show. Now, the first thing we need to do is we want to see it play on his show. That will tell us that everything's okay, all the images are okay and everything else. But in order to do that, we need to render it. So we'll click on Render All and we'll let it render away. This is running on my laptop, so it's not an enormously powerful computer. So it'll take a little while, hopefully not too long. All right, it's done. So now we can hit play and we can check that image files and the like look okay. That's looking okay. Let's jump a little bit ahead to where some of his image files are. Okay, there we can see one of the image files. So at that point, it seems to be okay. So the next thing we'll do is we'll run a quick check sequence. I don't really care about all his model errors. That's Logan's problem. Obviously, he's okay with that. Interesting. I'm not sure if you knew, Logan, that you were missing node 2 on your head between eyes. But again, not really important. What's really important is underneath all of this is our things, our sequence errors, effects problems, no problems found. Now this is important because if there were images that couldn't be found, they would appear here as errors, and there are no errors. There's a whole stack of warnings here, but no errors. So that's a really good sign that everything has come across correctly. Now the next thing we do is really important, and that is we must save the sequence. Now, the reason we need to save the sequence is when the sequence was loaded up into xLights, xLights went and looked at the sequence, realized that all of these models, because Logan happens to sequence on a Macintosh and this is a Windows PC, so all of the folders were entirely different locations. But because we kept the show folder the same, his xLights 2016 the same, xLights was smart enough to work out, well, hang on a second, all that's happened is this folder has been moved to another location on the computer, and it went through and it fixed up all of the image file locations. But it only did that in memory. So in order to make sure that those image file locations are written back into the XML file permanently, I have to save it. If you don't save it and then you try to import it, it would import all the image files as if they were located wherever Logan had put them on his computer. And of course, that location doesn't exist. And because we're not loading up Logan's sequence with the show directory being his show directory, it also doesn't know how to fix them up. And so everything is broken and stays broken. So it's really important you go through this process. Set your show folder to be Logan's folder, load the sequence in, render it, play it, make sure it's okay, do a check sequence, make sure it's okay. When everything looks okay, save the sequence. Once you save the sequence, you have everything done that you need to do before you go back to your show folder and start to do the import. But before we do that, there's one other thing that we need to start thinking about. And that is, we need to have a little bit of a look at Logan's layout here and try and understand what's going on. So obviously he's got this mega tree up the middle. I've got a mega tree, I can take advantage of that. His arches are kind of interesting, and I'm going to have to choose how I do that. I have some arches, but mine aren't these triple arches. I have single arches, but I have a couple of sets of them. So there are a few options here. He's got these trees, I guess they are. I've got some mini trees which I might be able to use. He's got a roof line, which is fine. I have a roof line. So there's enough elements here that are fairly similar that I'm hoping I can do a decent job of mapping. I'm not going to map it all, but we will map a few elements. So that's okay. If you want to have a reference, you could always come up here and do an export models, and that will give you a nice spreadsheet listing all of the models here. Of course, it doesn't really help you determine where they are. That can only be done by spending a bit of time here, clicking on things and learning. Well, he calls this a mega tree, because you're going to need to know this when it comes time to map. These things here are called Central Garden Ground RGB. Now, I never would have guessed that when it came time for mapping. These things here are Pixel White Tree 1. Okay, so these are Pixel White trees. These are spiral trees, more spiral trees. And then we've got even more over here. What are these things? These are pixel candy canes. So remembering this will be important when it comes time to actually do the mapping. Now, we're not going to do all of the mapping. We're going to do a bit of it. It gets quite tedious. But I think we've seen enough of this that I'm pretty comfortable I can at least start to bring some things in and make it look half decent. He also has some model groups. So Arch 1 is all three, so that's okay. His arches group, that makes sense. His candy canes makes sense. Columns, okay, his house verticals. I've got some house verticals. If he's using that, I might need to worry about that. His pixicles, okay, so that's his icicles. And he's got more on the carport. He's got some presents there. He's got some roof stars. I've got some snowflakes. Maybe I can use those. They appear to be, maybe not. He's got a couple of spinners, has he? Oh, okay, he's got spinners here. Snowflakes. Oh, okay, that's what he calls snowflakes. He's got 3 of them there. Okay, Windows stars, Windows group. Okay, pretty comfortable with that. You can also come over here and look in here, because you can see here that he's actually only using a subset of his models. Actually, we should look at his master view. I lie, he's using a lot of models. All right, there's going to be a fair few things that we need to map. Okay, all good. So let's go back to our setup and we're going to change it. We're going to jump back up to my home folder, which is my show folder. And we're not going to save any of that. Okay, it's just an error around creating a backup. So this is my house. So you can see I have a house outline. I do have a mega tree. It's a little bit taller than Logan's, but it's fairly similar. I have arches over my driveway here. I also have these smaller pixel arches. I also have another 3 sitting over here. A bunch of trees here that I might be able to use. These are dumb RGB trees. Might be able to use that. These are pixel snowflakes. I might be able to use those a bit as well. So there's a few enough elements there that I think I could do a decent job of mapping. So the next thing I need to do is I need to create a new sequence. It's going to be a musical sequence. I'm going to go into the imported folder because quite kindly Logan provided me with the audio file. We'll use all the defaults from here. So we're done. I'll bring that back in a minute. All right, so we're already, it's brought in all my models. I'm not very selective. I'm actually not a big user of views, but it all looks pretty good. And now we're ready to do import. Now, there's one thing I do want to show you that's not particularly relevant for Logan's sequence because of the way Logan's sequence is. But if you're importing, say, Sean's house, and Sean's got that series of snowflakes, I'm sure many of you have seen, that run up his house, which I don't have. I do want to show something that was added just in 2017.12. And so I don't really have a vertical element like a set of snowflakes that runs vertically up the house. And the vertical nature of those snowflakes is actually really important. Lilia uses them to represent rising notes. And so if I really wanted to have something that represented those rising notes, what I could do is I could break the tree up into layers. So, you know, a segment at the top, a segment here, etc., which kind of sounds like a lot of work. And it used to be that you'd have to go and create either a bunch of shadow models, which is kind of complicated because my bulbs obviously run up and down. And so I'd have all sorts of weird ranges and it'd be quite difficult to create. With submodels, that got a little bit easier, and just the other week, it got even easier again. So I can't remember exactly how many Sean has, but let's imagine it's 9. So I can add, oh, sorry, I'm not going to add. What I'm going to do is I'm going to generate a submodel, and I'm going to call it, my tree snowflake, because that's what it's representing in Sean's display. And I want it to be a vertical subbuffer. So it's a subbuffer that's stacked up vertically, and I want 9 of them. And what it's going to do is it's going to generate 9 of these subbuffers or submodels. So one's going to be at the bottom, 2, and so forth. And they don't overlap. They're all designed very carefully so they don't overlap, and it's nicely and neatly broken this model up into 9 submodels, which I can then use in my sequencing to represent those snowflakes, and I can put the effects on each one of those squares and bring in Lilia's sequence a lot easier than I otherwise could. So it's a kind of neat feature for bringing in, particularly if you've got relatively few elements and you're trying to bring in a display like Sean's, which has a large number of elements on it. Anyway, it's a bit of a sidetrack. So let's get back to bringing in Logan's sequence. So to bring Logan's sequence in, we need to do import effects. It happens to be an xLights sequence because Logan's a long-time xLights user. And if you remember, it was located in the, and this is the one that I saved. Okay, so now this is a little bit different in 2013 than it was in 2012. Here's all of my models that appear here in exactly the same order that they appear there, I think that's right. And then this is everything that that Logan used. Now, many of these things are just his models or his model groups. He does have some down here where he's actually put effects on at the strand level, and that's going to be important. So let's hop down and find my tree. There it is, my arch tree. And we're going to grab his mega tree, and we're going to, sorry, it scrolls now. Where's my arch tree? Okay, we're going to drop that on there, and then we're going to open it up. And here we've got all those snowflake models we added, but we don't need those. We actually need the strands. And so we're going to drag mega series strand 1, 10. Turns out that drag and drop is painful at times. We'll stretch this out. This is actually not right. This should be stretching down here, so I'm going to have to fix that. Okay, so that's interesting. He has, I have a 16 strand tree. He only has 12. So what I might do is I might add 2 to all of the mappings in order to make it look right. So we'll come back up here. We'll put that on 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So you can see this is a little easier than it used to be. 8 and 9. All right, so that's our mega tree mapped. It really is as easy as that. And we can collapse that back up so it doesn't take up as much room. Let's go and map maybe one other thing. So I think he has an all house model here somewhere. Mega tree, pergola, pixels. Oh, here's a star mega tree. So I have a star on my mega tree as well. So let's drop him on there. But I know he has an all house or he has a pixels model or something. It really does help if you know his display reasonably well. It's why it's actually quite easy for someone who's mapping their own show. Was there pixels? Pixel candy cane, present. I'm going to take this a little bit slower. Carport, central ground, RGB, left pixels. Okay, that's interesting. So he's got something that, right, pixels, group, roof group, roof group. Okay, so let's take the roof group. So I don't actually, so I have a house outline. I wonder if I should plonk that down on my house outline. Whole house group. There we are. So I'm pretty sure I have a pixels group here somewhere. There we are, pixels. We'll put the whole house on the pixels. All right, that'll do. Now, the next thing you want to do is you want to save the mapping because we will come back and we'll potentially want to do a few more things. So creating a mapping file is useful. Leaving it in the Star Wars folder is useful as well, and we can just call it mapping.xmap. That looks good. We click OK, and it brings it all in. So here we have the pixels coming in. A little bit further down, there's a star. There's the arch tree. And if I double click on the arch tree and come down to the strands, you can see there's a bunch of stuff coming on the strands. That's probably, that doesn't actually look like I was expecting. Not sure that's right. Anyway, so having done an import, you have to do a render because it doesn't render automatically on import. So you do need to render it. And then we can start playing it. It would help if I had my whole house model. So you can see this hasn't come in properly. Something's missing here. Oh, need to go back and look at that. It's not looking too bad. I want to see one of the images come in. Okay, so there's one of the images. Okay, so it looks like the images have all come in correctly, which is good. I do seem to have a problem on my tree import. But we can go back in, we can reload that mapping and see where we stuffed up the tree. And who knows, maybe I found a bug, I'm not sure. Okay. It does look like it should work. So I'll have to go back and have a look and see why exactly that didn't work, because that's definitely the correct way to be doing the mapping. Okay, that time it did come in. Very interesting. Not sure why it didn't work the first time. And to be honest, it clearly shouldn't have bought things in on strands 15 and 16. So I'm not sure what was going on there. Again, having brought it back in, you have to keep going back and rendering. So every time you do an import, make sure you go back and do a render all. Otherwise, it won't bring all of the effects in correctly. There's definitely still some anomalies in that import I'm going to have to look at. The strand 13 hasn't come in correctly. So anyway, we can go back and look at why that hasn't come in correctly. The beauty of import is that if it's failing on you at any time, you can always just delete it and go back and re-import it. The import process is a very repeatable process. Actually, that looks a lot better. Not sure what was going on there. Again, we need a house model. Yep. Good enough. And then, of course, you'd want to save that sequence in your own show folder as Star Wars. And that's basically how you go about doing it. Like I said, you'll go backwards and forwards several times. You can go back now and do the trees or do the arches. You don't even need to go back and delete the effects. We go back into imported, Logan, Star Wars Funk, xLights, Star Wars Funk XML. And we can go back and say, well, now we're going to do the arches. So we've got an arches group here. I have some lawn arches here, which is the actual group, which is fine. And then he's got big arch 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I might use that on my strand 1, 2, 3, 4 here. So let's call that big arch 1, big arch 2, big arch 3, and big arch 4. So you can map it at strand level, at model level, mix and match it, however it works for you. Don't forget to save your mapping, because otherwise next time you come in, that mapping won't be there. And now we can go back up and find our arches model. There's our star, house outline, pixels. Where's our arches model? Okay, there's our lawn arches there. So let's brought those in, and I can open it up and see my effects that have been brought in on the strand level. And where they overlap with the lawn arches, you're going to have issues with blending and whatever. Now, one other thing I should mention, now I know that Logan built this sequence quite some time ago. This is not a recent sequence, and consequently when he built the sequence he would not have had model blending where overlapping channels between models and groups blend together. So you would probably in this circumstance want to turn this off in order to get an effect that looks most closely like the one that Logan originally intended. If you've got someone who's been producing the sequence this year, you may want a different setting. How you can tell is go back into Logan's sequence, bring up the sequence settings and see how he has this checkbox checked, and you should probably model it the same way. Otherwise, you won't get exactly the same effect where you have overlapping models and things like that. So look, I think that's long enough. I could spend a lot more time on it. Most people would spend many hours importing someone's sequence. Once you've imported someone's sequence, however, it becomes easier to do the next one. And so how about we spend a little bit of time and demonstrate that. So let's go back to Dropbox and I don't know, let's grab Let It Snow. Direct download. Open the file. Okay, notice how the show folder is exactly the same. That's not surprising. We're going to go back over to here and we're going to add a new folder here called Let It Snow. And we'll go back to that downloaded folder and we'll bring it in. There it is. Okay, so here he has included the MP3 as well. Got a bunch of images in here as well, but that's all good. So that looks good. So very quickly, it's a nice refresher for you. So what do we do first? We change our show folder. So let's go into imported, Logan, Let It Snow, xLights 2016, and we'll select that folder. Do I want to save all the views models? No, I don't. All right. So we're back in Logan's layout. Looks good. Let's go into the Let It Snow directory. We'll grab his song. Looks good. I could render it. I don't really need to. Let's have a quick look at the check sequence. Just double check down the bottom there that everything mapped. Yeah, look, there's some transition time issues, but Logan obviously meant that, so that looks okay. We'll have a quick look at his sequence settings. As I said, he doesn't have allow blending between models, so we'll need to make sure we do that when we create our sequence. I can do a quick render. It's done. Play it. Looks good. So don't forget, you need to save it. Save the updated path to all of those image files and everything else. It's all done. So now we go back, we change back to our show folder. Select that. No, we don't need to save anything. Again, we have a backup issue, don't care about that. Okay, so now we're going to go and create a new sequence. It's a musical sequence. Again, we'll go into the imported Logan, Let It Snow, xLights, Let It Snow. There's our audio file. You remember we wanted to turn off allow blending mode between models because he didn't have it on. So again, up comes my slightly oversized, oh, didn't grab properly, there we go, house. And we're ready to do an import. So we'll do an import effects. Let It Snow's the XML file, looks good. Now, we can actually load the mapping that we used for Star Wars Funk. So if we go back to Star Wars, xLights, that was in the Star Wars, there's the mapping. We can load that. And what that does is it brings in the arches mapping, all of my megatree mapping. Where's my megatree? Why is it not portal? Oh, it didn't bring my arch tree in. Probably because he hasn't used his arch tree over here, or he's changed the name of the model. Oh no, there's the megatree there. Very curious. Not sure why that didn't work, because it should have done. In this case, he hasn't done. So where's his whole house? There's his whole house, and I put that on my pixels model, wherever that was. Pixel trees, all trees. Where's my pixels? Oh, there it is. So I'll put our whole house group on there. And we can save this mapping. We can go back and put it into the Let It Snow. I'll save it there. Oh, actually, we'll go on the Let It Snow directory. We'll save it there. Done. And it's brought it in. A quick render. And a play. Okay, so clearly not a lot's happening at the beginning, but there. Oh, the weather outside is frightful, but the fire is so delightful. And since we've no place to go, let it snow, let it snow, let it snow. It doesn't show signs of stopping. So it's come across, there's obviously not a lot mapped there. A couple of bugs for me to look at. I'm not sure why they didn't work correctly, but hopefully that gives you a better idea about how you go about taking someone's sequence like Logan's, preparing it for import. Please remember those steps. Those steps are really important. Whatever you do, do not change the name of his show folder, which is the folder that appears inside the zip file. Make sure you put it into a folder underneath your show folder. So if you copy your show folder to another computer, all of your image mapping and everything else will continue to work. Make sure that you run a check sequence and check that there's nothing that seems to have not come across correctly, and make sure you do a render and a save. The render's just there so you can play it and check that everything looks okay. The save is really important because it makes sure that all of those fixed up file names are actually written to the XML file before you do the import. So I hope that was helpful. Look forward to having some feedback on how that model mapping and everything else works, and hopefully I can find those last few problems, which will make it easier. So thanks, guys.